Victorian times were full of intrigue, ingenuity, and amazing inventions. The scientific achievements of the era between 1837 and 1901 were not only remarkable, but also laid the groundwork for modern human progress and technology. However, not everything they touched was gold. They did a lot of weird things in the name of innovation, experimentation, and scientific ideas, and some of their discoveries were quite questionable too. Did they really find evidence of a giant race? Were they able to find the land where Atlantis was once settled? Did humans have a sixth sense and then lost it? Welcome to Nutty History, and today, let's look at some of the most disturbing discoveries of the Victorian era. Viewer discretion is advised for this video, as some of this video may be offensive or disturbing. We, the makers of this video, in no way support or condone the actions of the subjects featured. Since mentioned in Plato's works, Timaeus and Critias, the legend of Atlantis has survived pop culture in one way or the other over the centuries, but it got some major revival during the Victorian times. It makes a lot of sense. Plato's allegorical city's description, in many ways, does fit the steampunk aesthetics that was born during the Victorian era. As Atlantis surged back into people's imaginations, so did the interest to learn its true location. Exploration was still a trendy and hip thing to do during the Victorian era. In fact, it had become a full-on celebrity profession during those days, and the search for Atlantis soon became a global challenge for all the explorers and scholars out there. Amidst these attempts, notable zoologist Charles Emile Blanchard proposed that at some point within the human geological period, Europe must have been connected to the region of Labrador in Canada. The connection was formed by a subterranean link of land that ran from Scotland through Orkney and the Faroe Islands to Iceland and Greenland. Blanchard's theory was supported by the fact that many European plants and animals could be found on North American soil. Rose, lilies, orchids, and anemones are growing on either side of the pond, and many species of beetles and spiders along with beavers and reindeer are common on both continents as well. But the damning evidence, according to Blanchard, was the river perch, a fish that never leaves fresh water. So how come it crossed the salty Atlantic if the two continents wouldn't have been connected in the past? Well, an investigation was conducted and it was found that the sea over this supposed tract of land was indeed comparatively shallow. That means the islands in question should be vestiges of the lost land as Blanchard deduced. But was this lost land Atlantis? Blanchard's contemporaries believe so, but it seems like a far stretch. Would we find remains of human civilization at the ocean's bed in these regions? From east to west, every human civilization developed its own myths and legends, and somehow each of them has one element in common: gigantic, bipedal humanoids that look very much like us, but not exactly. Nimrod and Goliath from Abrahamic mythology, Hanuman and Kumbhakarna in Hindu mythology, and Ymir and Surtur from Norse mythology are some of the examples of giants. But for ages, they have been considered nothing else but myths about colossal beings roaming over the land to tower over all in their path. Yet these awe-inspiring stories have very little truth about them, even though history here and there does try to toy with our fantasies. One of the most curious cases of such an instance happened during the Victorian Age, when a skeleton of a giant was allegedly found in France. The news, or rather the rumor, spread like wildfire and even found its place in scientific journals in the winter of 1890, constituted real evidence of giants' existence in history. The man behind this ridiculous claim was Georges Vachard de la Pouge, a French anthropologist who made this discovery at Castle Nau-le-Lez, a commune in the Occitanie region of southern France near the city of Montpellier. Monsieur de la Pouge's real purpose there was to study the ancient Bronze Age burial tumulus, a sort of cemetery. As you would expect from an ancient cemetery, de la Pouge uncovered a large number of human burials there, but near the bottom of the burial site, he found something remarkable. This section, by estimation, was a lot older and must have dated all the way back to the Neolithic times. What de la Pouge found there is now referred to as the Giant of Castelnau, but it is only a collection of 3 bone fragments: a humerus, a tibia, and femoral midshaft. According to de la Pouge, these fossil bones belong to one of the largest humans known to ever exist, which according to his calculations must have stood 11.5 feet or 3.5 meters tall. That's a lot of dude. The supposed bones of the giant were analyzed at the University of Montpellier, where M. Sabatier, professor of zoology, and M. Deloge, professor of paleontology, studied it in addition to other anatomists. In 1892, the bones were yet again observed carefully by Dr. Paul Louis André Kiener, professor of pathological anatomy at Montpellier School of Medicine. He openly admitted that the fossils indeed represented a very tall race. Nevertheless, he also found them abnormal in dimensions and appearance of morbid growth rather than a regular feature. The bones were reportedly sent to the French Academy of Sciences for further study. But since then, no modern peer-reviewed study has been published about the alleged giant bone fragments. British zoologists stumbled upon an unusual tropical plant on the torrid plain of British India's northwestern region in 1885. They called it Phytolacca electrica. Phytolacca is a genus of perennial plants that are native to North and South America and Eastern Asia, and most of the members of this genus are identified as pokeweeds or pokebush, pokeberry, pokeroot, or poke salad. But the Indian subcontinent is not a place where you would expect a plant of this genus to be growing. According to those who discovered it, this exceptional and extraordinary species generated a strong current of electricity that flowed all the way through it, from root to tip on blooming. They observed that birds and insects that came in contact with the tree were killed at once, but most had learned to keep well away. It is believed that the indigenous people who lived in the region had also learned to stay away from it, and they regarded it with awe and reverence. Further observations by people who studied it revealed that the electric current would vary throughout the day and would be at its peak in the afternoon, nearly 2 p.m. local time, and would be most dormant in the nighttime. Snapping a twig or stem of the plant would produce an intense electric shock strong enough to even stagger the toughest of men. They also recorded that the tree had enough influence to affect magnetic compasses even at a distance of up to 20 feet. The plant's electric power was recorded strongest during thunderstorms, but during the rainy season, the plant would stay dormant otherwise. Though the discovery was widely reported back then in the newspapers, the plant lost its value in the science fraternity or was never taken seriously due to a lack of samples. The northwestern front of the Indian subcontinent, now in Pakistan, is not the safest place to be around as a scholar, unfortunately. Was the plant real? Well, we may never know. William Thomson, the first Baron Kelvin, was a great scientist, mathematician, and physicist. He played an important role in the formulation of the first and second laws of thermodynamics, and absolute temperatures are stated in units of Kelvin in his honor. He is also known for proposing that the human body has a sixth and a seventh sense. In 1883, Lord Kelvin proposed the theory that heat and force combined make up our sixth sense, and there is even a seventh sense called magnetism. He suggested that the phenomenon of clairvoyance can be explained by the fact that some people were in tune with their magnetic senses much better than others. He carried on to explain the reasoning behind why some people feel more attuned to otherworldly guidance and interpret it as a guardian angel or an ancestral spirit watching over them and giving them signs in their time of need. There was a series of experiments conducted, and several people who took part were able to successfully tell when the electromagnet placed around their head was turned on. Though it sounds like a reasonable explanation for what is usually considered a supernatural phenomenon, it was still borderline pseudoscience, and Lord Kelvin's theory was largely forgotten in modern times. However, in the 1970s, scientists decided to revisit this theory. According to the research of these curious men of science, they found that the human nose does indeed consist of bones and sinews that may once have been receptive to the Earth's magnetic field. Maybe that's where the old expression, follow the nose, comes from. These bones and sinews would have acted as a kind of built-in compass. But during the course of evolution, humanity somehow lost this functionality as it began to settle down and stop wandering. Magnetism, if real, must have helped migrate like many animals that managed to successfully navigate vast distances during migration. Ball lightning is a rare and unexplained phenomenon that has both puzzled and amazed scientists over the centuries. There have been a number of proposed hypotheses to explain reports of ball lightning, but scientific data on the spectacle is rather scarce. The elusive nature of this fickle and yet astounding marvel has resulted in inconsistent findings to the extent that the existence of ball lightning as a distinct physical phenomenon remains unproven. The oldest known account of the sighting of ball lightning comes from an English monk, Gervais of Canterbury, who saw a marvelous sign near London on June 7, 1195. The next known record comes as late as the 17th century from the Great Thunderstorm of Whitcomb-in-the-Moor, but the only known historical visual evidence is owed to Mr. Dunn, who was able to take a photograph of the ball lightning in a thunderstorm on the night of July 17, 1891. If genuine, this is considered the first ever photograph of ball lightning and remained the solitary evidence of the phenomenon until Asian scientists were successful in capturing the phenomenon once more on film during a lightning storm in 2012. However, that makes Mr. Dunn's photograph even more extraordinary because he shot it with one of the earliest generations of cameras and he managed to preserve the exposed plate. The descriptions of ball lightning have varied from account to account, but they are generally spherical or pear-shaped with fuzzy edges and appear almost simultaneously with close-to-ground lightning discharge. Scientists have long attempted to reproduce the ball lightning in laboratory experiments, and though some have been able to artificially produce it, such as Nikola Tesla, it has not yet been determined whether there is any relation. Tell us in the comments below about any shocking discoveries you know about, and as always, thanks again for watching Nutty History. Don't forget to share, like, and subscribe.